All right. I would appreciate it if you can hear me. If you can just raise your hands, that's those little blue buttons there, then I can actually see that everyone has. Yeah, great. That's fantastic. Okay. Okay, that's everyone. So then I'm going to say welcome all again this evening. What we're going to be doing tonight is the first of the modules of manage integrating the integrating process of project management. And it's quite big, so what we will have to do is do it in two parts. So we're going to do it this week, and then in 2 weeks' time we'll do the second part. And I'm going to say you probably want to leave this one from your assessment perspective until after after you've done some of the other modules. Now, I just want to say one other thing here is I was supposed to get the assessment up today, and unfortunately I didn't. Hopefully it will be up by tomorrow. Somehow it went missing somewhere. So please excuse me. I'm sorry about that. And Sarah and myself will make sure that we can get it up tomorrow or the next day, hopefully by tomorrow. I will also have this recording up. So you will be able to go back on this as well. So thank you for this evening. Let's get going. We're doing project management and we're doing the integrated process. But before we do that, I've done all my housekeeping already. I've told you all the things that we're going to be doing. So let's get on to the next slide. What we need to do when we're doing project management is really think out of the box, or quantum leap thinking. So what do we mean by that? Well, the problem that we have with a lot of best practices and standards that we put in there, we seem to tend to think that once we've got a good method, or once we've got some good standards, that's the only way that we can think of things. We sometimes don't think outside the box, and we think, well, this standard is keeping us to exactly what we want, and that's not what it's always all about. Sometimes in projects we need to think and break out of those things and try and do it. That's, I suppose, the difference between managing and leading. When you want to lead, you want to get outside of those things that you're actually doing. And when you're managing, you want to try and contain it within that box. So if what I'm trying to say is this: if you think the way you have always thought and do what you have always done, you're going to get the results you've always gotten. So I can't remember who said that, but we'll find out now. So let's go on to the next one, and let me say, can anybody tell me how many F's are in the sentence? Come on, just on the chat line, just put up how many F's are in this sentence. Give you a second or two, or at least until somebody takes a guess or counts them. Come on, please, somebody put up what you think. There's 6 there. Okay, Colin thinks there's 6. All right. Anybody else got any ideas? Come on, Colin's put one up. Somebody else put another number up there. How many F's in the sentence? 7. Okay, Ross has got 7. Nigel's only got 3. Okay. Well, let's highlight them and let's count them. So that's the ones that most people would put up there. Yep, you see, Nigel and Megan got those ones, and those are the ones that normally come up. But what about these ones? So Colin was right. Ross was right. Okay. There are 6 of them there. What we're trying to do is don't think in the normal way. So what we're trying to do here in this exercise is that we're trying to understand that we're focused in one thing, and we get focused like that because we do the same thing over and over again. So what we really want to do is we want to take an integrated. Whoa, this is not going to be any good. Can you guys just hold on for 1 second? We've got someone mowing outside, and that's going to interrupt you. So if I can just Just hold on, all right? I won't be a sec. I just want to speak to them. All right. That's good. Okay. That's great. All right. When we look at an integrated approach, in the diploma of project management, you could actually count it as a program management prep exam as well as the diploma of management. So that's all we're saying on this one. But we're also saying that it's integrated with many of them. So I want to try and make a difference here between what the standard is, the national standard for the Diploma of Project Management, and what it means to prepare or undertake the PMI's PMP exam. Now the PMI's PMP exam is in fact an international qualification as well. So we need to look at that one. Most of the course and the national standard, the BSB 521 Diploma of Project Management, is based upon the PMBOK 3rd edition. So that's what it's based on. Okay. And here are the 9 knowledge areas that we're actually going to look at, and that's why you get the modules from BSBPMG521A to 509. And in this course that we're doing on the integration one, we're going to look at also the code of ethics and the professional conduct as well from a project management. So if we look at those, that's really what you're going to get, and those areas are what you're going to get tested on if you did the PMI exam as well. From the course delivery perspective, from me giving you out material, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have some theory sessions. They're online, self-paced sessions, so this has been recorded, and you will be able to go on. There are some online sessions as well on each one of these. It's basically written, and there's like slides on each one of them. So you can go through that from getting onto our Moodle, and if you go to where the course is, the heading there, you can actually do the self-paced sessions. Of course, we're doing this as well, which is a very short time. We only got 1 hour, and so I'm trying to get a lot into a very short time. So it's only really highlights that you're going to see from these sessions. What we have done as well is that we've also got in between this session and the next one, we've got a Q&A session. So if you're having problems, that's a very good time to actually sign in again at the Q&A sessions. So if you've got questions that you want answered, that's a good time to do it. Other people also have some good ideas as well, so it might actually help you if you do sign on the Q&A sessions. So we can also do some practical sessions outside of these webinars. So if we need to get together as a group at any time, we can do that, and we can do some of the practical exercises using this method as well. So if we need to test, for example, your interaction on how you would go about negotiating, we could do a simulation on online, and we could do a simulation of a client and a sponsor dealing with a project manager. So we can actually use this method as well when we're doing your assessments. I'm not saying we will. What is important on your assessments are the following things. So if we want the diploma, I want the diploma, so what we're going to do is there's a theory multiple choice quiz for each knowledge area. And I'm really asking you to do that. It's up front. You'll see it when you go into Moodle. Each one of the units will have a multiple choice one, and I really suggest that you go through that. It's taken from the PMI test bank, so these questions are what they would ask, and it's for each module, and it'll actually give you an understanding from the PMI testing, but it'll also tell you where you're standing with this now. Now, don't worry about it. You're not doing well on this one or whatever. This is for your own self-assessment. It's to give you an idea where you stand and the areas that you need to actually focus on when we're looking at project management. A lot of these things that you would know already. So my suggestion is that you go and do that initial test. It'll give you an idea of where you're at, and will help you where you need to learn more. Okay, the theory, the project questions that you're going to get from the assessments and the scenarios to test the underpinning knowledge, we'll do that there. If we need to, we'll put some role plays in, and we might do some of those through our net meetings to test some underpinning skills when we get into the assessment. And then there's the practical, the from a project management. So those are really, you need to complete the templates, and you need to transfer that knowledge to show that in a simulated environment as well. So you want to look at that. The assessment you can upload under each of the projects. Now that project is not the same project that we're talking about here. Every assignment is actually called a project as far as global training is concerned, and every project has a little number, and then that ties in with a lot of other things that we actually do. So that's how you will be uploading them. And if you haven't, Sarah's been doing some webinars, and she's got some recordings on how to go about uploading assessments on Moodle. I would suggest that you actually use that. If there are any questions before we get into the next section, any questions on this one? All right, I'm going to look at. We're going to look at how the PMBOK guide organizes information into 4 areas of responsibility. We're going to look at some of the knowledge areas that it looks at, and from a general perspective of how they would see best practice. Okay, as the national standard is modeled on this one, it's very good to get an understanding of this one. The primary purpose of the PMBOK guide is to identify a subset of project management body of knowledge that is generally recognized as good practice. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everything has to be done at the same time. Hence the thing that I said, we sometimes need to look out of the box. So I don't want to tie you into this, but it does. What we need to do for the assessment, but when we're doing these, is to get an understanding that you understand what these concepts mean, that you understand and have the skills to negotiate, have the skills to actually use the techniques and the methods and the tools within within this project management. That's what you need to demonstrate to us, and so you will know that it's done to this standard. All right, now let's have an introduction to project management. Introduction to project management, and I suppose the first question we need to ask is what is project management? Are they the daydreams of cat herders? Or, I don't know. But there have been some fascinating projects over the years. Okay, each one of these would have been a project. Right from the building of the pyramids, to building bridges, to landing people on the moon, and even the atomic bomb, and even sailing around the world. If we look at that. The climbing of Mount Everest, the reaching of the North Pole, all of those are projects in some way or another. Now, they would have been done and using project methodologies, believe it or not. A lot of these would have. There's a common theme that runs right throughout all of these things, even though it's based over years and years and years. And what we really need to then ask is, what is a project, and what is the commonality of all of these projects? And we'll see that there are some things that are common. Right? So if we ask the question, what is a project? It is a collection of linked activities. So if we went back to those ones there were a whole lot of linked activities to build a pyramid. There were a whole lot of linked activities to climb Mount Everest. It's very interesting that we would all think of Edmund Hillary as being the first and saying to be the first up on the mountain, but we forget that there were literally thousands of other people involved in this project just to get them to the top. If you went to Everest today, you'd see that it's not quite the same. You have expedition today just getting to the top, and there are literally thousands of people that climb Mount Everest every year. But when they did the first first climb, it wasn't the same. They had to transport everything by foot over hundreds of kilometers. They had to set up at least 9 base camps. Not everybody got to the top. In fact, the leader of the expedition, Colonel Hunt, never really got to the top. He actually stationed himself at the base camp. He could see the peak at one of the base camps. I think it was base camp 7 or 5 or 6. And he could see the peak, so he could, through his binoculars, see if they actually made it to the top or not. There was one area that they couldn't, but he was the leader. And we don't often think of that. So it's a series of linked activities, and they carried out in an organized manner with clearly defined start point and an end point. In other words, whether you're building a pyramid, there's a start point when you start that pyramid, and there's an end point when it's finished. There's a start point in starting an expedition and getting to the top or getting back. There's a start point of traveling around the world. Everything in a project has a start and an end point. That's what links all projects together. So we could call anything, any piece of work that is a collection of linked activities that needs to be carried out in an organized manner, and that has a start point and an end point. If we did that, we could call it a project. That's really briefly what a project is. Now, you will find that on page 8. All right. It has to also achieve some specific results. Really needs to achieve some specific results. Or in other words, it's pointless, isn't it? It's a project that just has no meaning if it doesn't have the results. So, in other words, there's a purpose for doing something like this. All right. So, what is a project? A project, another way to put it from PMBOK, a project is a temporary endeavor to create a unique product, service, or result. Okay, and here's another one. How can we distinguish between a project and an operational work? Well, on page 11 you would see something like this. There are some shared characteristics. Okay, all the work is performed by people, both in operational works and in projects. Okay, they are constrained by limited resources. Both lots are constrained. So here are management principles that are actually common to both projects and operational works. Okay, they're planned and executed and controlled. So each activity is planned, they're linked together, they're executed, and they're controlled. And they probably have a unique purpose. However, a project is unique, and it is temporary. And resources are often from various areas, and they are put on for a project and project only. There's always a primary sponsor, and it involves uncertainty. Normally a project is something that has never been done before, and it ventures into areas that have never been worked at before, or never been even understood at before. So there is an element of risk in this, and uncertainty. So, let's do an exercise quickly. Alright, here are 8 types of operations or projects, pieces of work if you like. I'm going to ask you to hazard a guess at which ones of these are operational and which one of these do you think are projects. Come on. Now, just write them up on the chat part of them. I'd really like you to think about this one and say, okay, which one of these ones is you think are projects, and which one of them would be operational. So what you can write is that you could write one, line one, you could say one is P, or one is O, or two is a P, or two is an O. So depending whether where you think it's a project or an operation, just write them up. I'd really, when I've seen you done it, most of you have put it up, then we'll turn the slide and we'll see what the answer is. One is P, two is O, three is O, four is P, 5 is O, 6 is P, 7 is P, and 8 is P. That's Colin's answer to that one. Thanks, Colin. That's a good answer. Anybody else got something? Well, raise your hands if you want me to go to the next page. Okay, Colin says, I'm ready to go to the next one. There we are. Nigel's got one. Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Shall I go to the next? There we are, Megan. All right. Let's go to the next page. There we are. Whoops, I don't have it. Somehow I've missed that page. I was expecting that. All right, so let me go through it. It's creating a policy is more likely going to be operational. So all those that put operational there, it's more than likely going to be operational. However, it could quite easily be a project. If it's a new policy, it will certainly have uncertainty in it. It would certainly be unique. It would certainly have something to do. So it's something that you're going to do in a business. So although it probably could be done within an operational work, more than likely this would be a project. Okay, so number one we would count as a project because it is unique and it would have a start and it would have a finish. So it would probably meet all the criteria for a project. Responding to a tender could be operational, but it certainly would be unique. So if I had to respond to a tender, most vendors would count this as a particular project. Okay, the reason is it would be unique to a particular response. It would have temporary people on it because it's a response to a tender. So there would be temporary people there. It would definitely have a start and a finish. It would definitely look at the impact of the business. And if they won the tender, then it would start another project or it would go back into the business. So it is possible that two could be one. But the ongoing batch production of a specific metal fabrication is definitely operational. And everybody got that one, right? If we look at the other one, putting up a mobile cellular towers, most probably that is a project. I think we could all agree with that one because there's definitely a start in that one. Running a fortnightly salary payment process, well, that is pretty much an operational, and I think most people would agree that that would be operational. Getting human resources out to a rig, well, that's another debatable one. But it could quite easily be a project. Very much possibly a project, although it would also has a lot of operational things into it as well, especially if you do it over and over again. So that could be debatable one as well. However, creating a recruitment process is the same as creating a new policy, although it's probably going to be operational. It's quite easy for the Human Resources Department to actually see that as a separate project. You're going to make an impact on the business. You're going to change the business. It has a unique starting point. It's a unique project. You won't do it over and over again. Once the recruitment process is completed, it is new and you would put it back into the business. So 7 is most probably a project. Revamping the recruitment process is most probably also operational. However, it could also be a project because it would be taking something new within the they would be you would be changing something, so there would be something unknown. So it could respond to all those project ones that we actually the things that would be unique. Now, in your blue book, there is a nice Hartley actually gives you a nice one for identifying projects and what would be a good project and what wouldn't. So I suggest that you could read there. We have put it down for you so you would actually see it. I think it's in chapter 1 or 2. So that would be a very good one. So now I want to talk about why do projects fail. I've grown up in the IT industry. I have been on the vending side. I have been on the customer side of information technology for many, many years. And about 5 years ago, I got the shock of my life when they told me when the stats for IT projects came out, and they said that 80% of IT projects fail. 80% of IT projects fail. Now, what would be termed as a failure? I'm going to just stop this for 1 second. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to put up a little triangle for you. I'm going to draw on the whiteboard. I'm going to put up a little triangle for you, and so that we can define what a project failure could possibly be. Okay, it sounds an incredible thing to see 80% failure rate in projects. Man, that really got me. I couldn't understand why. So let's look at what a failure in a project could be. Now, if we have a look at a triangle, and each one of these triangles had an aspect of projects on it, and this would be deliverables, and this one could be time, and this one over here could be cost. All right, so a successful project has these three things in balance. If any one of these things goes out, then the project is a failure to some degree or other. In other words, if you have a blowout with cost, it would be considered a failure. If you can't meet all the deliverables that you started with, then it would be considered a failure. If you went over on time by a certain amount, now obviously these would all have tolerances within. So there would be a cost tolerance, there would be deliverable tolerances, and there would be time tolerances. And that is the whole reason why we look at project quality, because this must be in balance. So let's say that each one of these things, if they go out of the tolerance, in other words, it goes further out than the tolerated time, or further out than the cost, than the costed project, or the deliverables don't be met within a certain deliverable, they would be considered a failure. Now that means that 80%, only 20% of projects and IT projects only succeed. That was quite a shock to me. So let me go back to where we were with this one. Whoops, there we are, right in the right place again. So why do projects fail? Well, here's some reasons why projects fail. Leaving out key people. In other words, not involving everyone. That means that not everybody has a good say. These people are key in whether this project succeeds or not, and it gets left out. And that's because project managers don't do a good stakeholder analysis. Not meeting the specifications. Not focusing on the objective. Not tracking the agreed changes in writing. Aha, scope creep. Changing the project scope. Key personnel dropping out of the project. And the key customer contact changes. Not managing contingencies as they arise. and poor time management. Now, if these are the reasons why projects fail, then these are good headings to be using when you're doing a risk analysis of a project. So these would be good if we were doing a risk analysis of a project. Okay, so remember some of these things. These will really help you to understand and to put things in place to mitigate so that these risks don't eventuate. All right, but the most important reason why projects fail is because of scope creep. That's why so many projects fail. Scope creep is the most important thing on any project. So in other words, you start with an idea of what the project must be, and it is not mandated correctly. And the view of what must be in this project changes. Most probably it's the deliverables that are going to change. Scope creep has got a lot to do with the idea of what that deliverable is. So that deliverable must be very, very, very clearly defined. Okay, it must be clearly defined. So the most important reason why projects fail is scope creep. Okay, so there we can see some mountaineers getting to the top of a mountain. And let's see what project management is. There are areas of expertise needed by the project team. So what are these areas? All right, so this diagram is based on PMBOK version 3. All right, so the project team needs to have some of these areas. All right, the project manager needs to understand the project management methodologies. He has to have a very good idea of the acts and the regulations that govern the business around what they're actually producing. Right, so somebody in the project team needs to have a good idea of the acts, the regulations, and the standards. That's the governance part of things. And then knowing the project environment is very, very important. So you have projects or subject area things. The project manager doesn't have to be a subject matter expert. It's really nice if a project manager comes out of that environment or understands that and becomes a project manager. Then in that industry, you will find that that is a really good project manager because he understands a lot of the area that he's actually doing. In other words, he has an idea of the industry and the discipline. Again, normally though, you would have definite subject matter experts on your team really understanding the industry or the discipline. And then you also need to have general management principles. Remember, you said there are many things that are the same in general management principles as they are in project management. There's overlap between the two. And then finally, the most important thing is to have interpersonal and communication skills. Within the team, if that is not there, you are going to have a problem. And maybe as we go through these areas, I can give you some areas that can highlight what happens if these areas are not met. So these are the skills that a project team has to have. Not everything has to be known by the project manager. Okay, it's obvious that he should know general management principles and he should have good communication and interpersonal skills. He should have a very good idea of the project management skills, but knowing the project environment or knowing the industry or the acts and the regulations might not necessarily be his expertise or her expertise, but they need somebody on the team that does understand these parts of it. All right, so now, if we had to divide a project up, we could divide it up into the project structure and the project content. And really, the project manager is the person responsible for the project structure. In other words, the project manager is the person responsible for accomplishing the project objectives. All right, so he is going or she is going to be held responsible for those project objectives. So the sponsor is going to hold the project manager is responsible for those objectives. Not the subject matter experts, not the people that are going to do the job on the end, not those people. It's the project manager that's actually held responsible. Okay, so that's why we have a project manager. The PM is the application. Project management is the application then of skills and tools and techniques to project activities in order to meet or exceed stakeholder needs and expectations from the project. Now, I've put in stakeholders there, but the most important stakeholder that you can ever have is your project sponsor or the project client. I'm going to give you a little tip. Yes, we need to take into consideration all the stakeholders in the project, but the most important person in this project, the most important stakeholder, the stakeholder that the project manager must really get to know and understand and be able to deliver to, is this project sponsor and the project or the project client. Sometimes the sponsor and the client is the same person, sometimes it could be slightly different. However, they are the ones that are going to determine in the end whether those objectives were met or not, the project objectives. Now, of course, there are stakeholders that are going to be very, very influential, especially in the first part of projects. But in the second part, as the project gets in, it's still the client that's going to be looking at those things, that the stakeholders play less and less of a role and less of an influence. Now, I want to say one other thing. As a project manager, if you keep your sponsor and your client happy, he will keep the rest of the stakeholders happy. So if he's happy, all the rest of the stakeholders are happy. Now, it's like doing a project in a home, and the mother is the home of everything. And you've heard that expression, if mom ain't happy, nobody's happy. All right, mom will keep everybody happy. So if mom gets happy, everybody's happy. Okay, you've heard of those. So in a project, if the client is happy or the sponsor's happy, everybody's happy. So that's a little thing that you need to remember. Now, what is different about project management? Well, differs from other forms of work in the organization and is increasingly being used by organizations because it provides ways to do what? Let's see. Keeping pace with ever-changing environment. Okay, I'm going to draw a little pigtail for you in a minute. I can. It's keeping change with an environment. When you've got a lot of change and you have to constantly go into areas that are unknown, it's very good to have projects. Okay, because projects are a specific way to be able to do those things. Now, the second one is continuously improve their processes and products. All right, if you want to do continuous improvements, you're going to make some interruptions in your process, and you're going to try and then put those improvements, and you're going to use a project to do just that. Okay, it always reminds me of the I got involved a little bit in the 3 Series, the BMW 3 Series. They manufactured that in South Africa, and the Germans actually decided that South Africa would be a good place to experiment with, I think they called it the E45 project, which really came out with a new series of BMWs 3 Series. Even that's now changed again, but that new 3 Series, I can always remember that project. And what I remember about was this. They actually made a project of it. And although it was a production in the end, what they were doing is that they basically set up a whole new line, production line. They set up a whole new production line. They did all sorts of tests on this production line. They did all sorts of tests on the end products that came out of that one. And when they got it to their perfection, then they handed the whole thing over to the new one. Why? To have a new, completely new production line, producing a new range of BMWs. So that was a project. Okay, and it did a lot of things. It kept pace with the ever-changing environment. They needed to take into consideration all the improvements. It was a way of testing out new ways of doing things, and that's exactly what happened in that project. In the whole thing, they experimented with different paints. They experimented with different ways of doing things until they got that new series perfect. The delivery of the services and the products and the ability. What they tried in South Africa on that one was to make every product almost unique. So you could go onto the website and you could decide what you wanted. So if you sat down with the salesperson, you could actually say, well, I want this color and this one and these seats and all of the different things, and you could make that configuration. It would be sent to the factory, and you would get that one. You would get that BMW made to your liking. And they tried to deliver that on time. In other words, if they made that at a particular time, you would actually get that product. Now, obviously, you're going to use the way of using different skills of individuals in a team environment. Okay, and that's normally quite effective. You've heard the NASA game. The NASA game was invented to show you that a team could actually do something far greater than the sum of a whole set of individuals. In other words, a team is 1 + 1 = 3, in which they call synergy. All right. The use of different processes for each project. The processes being designed to match a specific project requirements rather than recycling existing or old accepted ways. So project management is a way of thinking out of the box. All right, let's go on to the next one. And let's look at project management disciplines and how they relate to the other management disciplines. So if we take it, this is what we really look at when we're looking at project management. So the project management body of knowledge is generally accepted project management knowledge and practices, and it incorporates general management knowledge and practices and application area, in other words, the industry and all of those other things that go into it. So if you're in a particular industry, say the civil industry, and all of those things that go into that one, that is incorporated into what a relationship of what a project manager needs to do. So it's got its own body of knowledge plus general management body of knowledge and an application area, either IT or civil or mechanical engineering or whatever. Now, what I want to get into now are the types of organizations, different types of organizations from a projectized one. So what we would do is that we would say, there was a chap by the name of Henry Fail. Does anybody know who Henry Fail was? If anybody does, can just raise their hand. Does anybody know who Henry Fail was? He was a Frenchman, I can tell you that. Nobody know who Henry Fail was? Okay, Henry Fail was the shall we call him the grandfather or the father of the modern organization, the hierarchical organization that we have in most big corporations and most government organizations, most corporations today, was considered Henry Fail's thing. He did it in the coal mines in France at the end of the First World War and perfected it by the Second World War. In other words, he saw hierarchies, and this whole thing was command and control. All right, so what he did was he had a whole pyramid of things, and at different levels, people did different things. So that is what we would call a functional organization, because what Henry Fail did was he divided things up into different functions. And then he had a leader over those functions, and then he divided those functions up into groups, and each group of those had a particular thing. So that's called functional. A functional organization. And so Henry Fail was the grandfather, if you like, of the functional organization. Now, on the other end of the scale, you have a projectized company. Now, there are some projectized companies. There's not too many of them. And for a little while, I worked with a projectized company, and actually everything was projectized. In fact, they didn't have very many permanent employees from the basis that, they were permanently employed because there was always work to do, but it was a projectized organization. In other words, the management, even the senior management in that organization, was a project manager or a program manager, right? They did a lot of vending services to many people, and when the project came in, a tender responded with a tender, then they would put together a project team to carry out that project. But that's a projectized organization. Now, somewhere in between, you would get some other kinds of organizations. In other words, you might have a matrix organization, what they would call a weak matrix one. So it's very much a functional organization with a weak matrix and a balanced matrix and a strong matrix. Now, why am I saying these things? Well, here's the reason why. So you see that the functional organization is highlighted in red, and Project management decisions need to be cleared with the functional managers. So if you're in a functional organization, you have a problem being a project manager because no decisions are made by you unless they are cleared by the function manager. That makes life very difficult. Now, let's go and see another problem that you're going to have as a project manager in a functional organization. Project managers are basically assistants to the functional managers in getting things done. Right. In general, this is what happens in a functional organization. So, trying to put projects in a functional organization is very, very, very difficult because the project manager doesn't always make the decisions. It's going to be a functional manager that makes the decisions. And project managers are assistants to those ones in getting things done. They still see the functional manager as more important than the project manager. And the project manager spends a lot of time doing all the administrative tasks and often only works as the PM part-time. I know exactly what that means. Let me try and give you an idea of what that means. Okay, whoops, going too fast there. Okay, now let me give you an idea of this one. A higher educational organization is probably a great functional organization. All right, and in my normal work, I had a boss who was the head of information technology, if you like. He was called an executive director, or I put it into their terms, they would have called it a chief director, and he reported to a deputy vice chancellor. Right, who reported to a vice chancellor, and actually the vice chancellor is always the person that's like an CEO of the organization, and the deputy vice chancellor for operations was very similar to a COO. All right, so then we had a director, an executive director, who was responsible for the whole of information technology. Right, and I was made the project manager to implement a new project. And that project was to implement a system across the board. So it was a new administrative system that took everything about students into consideration. The whole financial system was on that one. The whole student administration was on that one. The whole hospitality was on that one. Everything that you could think of in that organization, or every function that you could think of that organization, was affected by this project. Okay? They gave me 18 months to do it, and I would have had all of these problems here. So how did we get around that problem? Well, it's your project structure that comes into consideration. If you want to get over these projects in a functional organization, then what you need to do is you need to set up a project board. That's exactly what we did. Who's the highest person in the functional organization? Well, it's normally the vice chancellor. Now, he would not sit on a board like that. But the DVC would sit on the board. And what he did was he brought his fellow DVCs, there were another 3 of them, and he brought them to sit on this project management board, and then he brought all these executive functional managers to that board. So my responsibility was directly to the DVC. As a project manager, he was my client and he was my sponsor. What happened with my boss? Well, of course, we always worked together on that one, and we never saw the client without him being there, so we could actually do that, otherwise it would have been a problem. But in a functional organization, it was the client that actually made all the other ones believe what had to be done. And actually, we were successful. It was one of those 20% projects that were IT projects that were successful because of the structure that you did in understanding a functional organization. So there is another organization, and that is a weak matrix organization. And on this one, project managers have some authority, but are not in charge of the resources of the project. Right? And this one is the major decisions still need to be made by the functional manager's cooperation or approval. Right. We'll talk about the functional organization as we go through various parts of this one, how you would actually work within a functional organization. And that's mainly because most of our organizations are still functional. All right. So the project expediters can work in a weak matrix organization. All right. In a balanced matrix, project managements share authority with the functional managers. And the PMs or project managers run the people management decisions by the functional manager, but have the functional manager runs the project decisions by the PM too. In other words, there's a crossover. In a strong matrix is much more authority given to the project managers. But the team still reports to both managers, which is a difficulty. And the team might be judged based on the performance of their projects as well as their functional expertise in a strong matrix. Okay. For project management, this is the best organization to work for. As I've worked for one, I understand it. Okay. Teams are organized around projects, and when a project is done, the team is released and the team members move off to another project. That's exactly how it worked. So a project manager here makes all the decisions about the project's budget, the schedule, the quality, and everything. For project management, that's a very easy organization to work for. However, that's not reality. So, next week, not next week, but the week after next, we're going to talk more about this one from an integration perspective. So these are some of the issues that you're going to come up with in this one. Now, I've got a few minutes left, about 10 minutes left, and it gives us an opportunity to ask some questions about what I've said and ask any questions that you want on the material tonight or anything about project management. Okay, so I've got another 10 minutes that we can actually ask some questions. So please go ahead with anything I've said tonight or anything else. Well, let me ask this question. Was it clear tonight, all the things that I said? Are there any areas that are confusing? Well, Nigel was happy. Okay. Thanks, Nigel. At least you under. Anybody else? Are there any questions? Don't go off just yet, just because there could be some good ones. Good. It was good. It was good revision for Colin, I know, because he participated really well in the last one. And Megan, it's pretty clear. Okay. All right then. If we're all clear and we're all happy and with tonight's thing, then let's say thank you. Oops, I left that one off, didn't I? And then I say thank you for listening and participating tonight. And I hope you have a good 2 weeks and prepare. I should have the everything should be up on the diploma part. Everything is up, so the assessments are up. You can have a look at the assessments. However, I don't suggest that you go to them straight away, but I suggest that you go through it. I suggest too that you go through the that multiple choice questions, and all the best in doing it. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to join. A very good time would be to do the Q&A. We're going to be doing the Q&As just now. There is a time when I've got for any Q&A. So if there are any questions about project management in any way, please send them. If you have questions that you want to ask and share with all the other participants, with everybody else, and I really highly recommend that, then please just email me and I will put them into the weeks that we have these sessions, because there's a question and answer session later on. And I will then broach those questions, and I'll be able to ask them more comprehensively. If it's left until now, I might not be able to answer everything comprehensively, and I might have to come back again. So there we are. Then I'm going to say, well, thank you all. Thank you for participating, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. Okay. Good night, all.